Hello, everyone. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is the new streaming network.com, home of goingsolomedia.com. We want to welcome you here to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about the relationship building. I'm Cece Shatz. I'm the Doyenne of relationship building. I'm a divorce, dating, and a life coach, connecting singles throughout the Going Solo Network. You can find my information on goingsoloNetwork.com. And we're talking about the really life after divorce, after relationship loss. And so today we have a wonderful guest here with us. We're going to talk about post-divorce modifications and in enforcement with Abbie Godles. Abbie is an attorney. She's a mediator from Mind Your Manners Mediation, which I think is an awesome name because I think as we're going through such difficult times, we do have to remember our manners as we're moving through and trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our families, right thing by ourselves, but we can do it in a way where we're not, arguing and creating such a conflict. But Abbie, welcome back to the show. You are kind of one that is on the Going Solo media here for some time now, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been able to dabble across the many podcasts and shows you offer on your network. I'm always impressed at the extent that you have built this up for all of your listeners, watchers. I mean, it's an incredible resource. No matter what you're looking for, you can find an episode and an expert to listen to.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. We appreciate you. Let's talk a little bit about you though. Why you have such a passion for helping those go through such a difficult time. And I love the idea of mediation. I always tell everyone I really am, I favor that because I feel like, when we're having to go through litigation, there's so much conflict going on. If we can try to come to some sort of resolution with regards to what we're going through, our assets, and split things up the way we kind of want them versus litigation where you're arguing and sometimes things go down the rabbit hole that you don't want them to go down. So tell us how you got into this and why you're so passionate about helping people.
Yeah, so I grew up in what I affectionately refer to as the 90s wild, wild west of divorces. It was still the stereotypical mom gets the kids during the week, weekend fun dad. You go visit dad. And, while my parents thankfully did it pretty well, I mean, I don't think anyone does it perfectly. You're breaking up in some form, whether divorce or if you were never married. I mean, it's still a long-term committed relationship. You are restructuring, so there is, this negative emotion bubbling. But my parents thankfully did remember that my sister and I were end game. We were the focus, that we didn't belong being messengers of their adult stuff or even just hearing the adult kerfuffles, so to speak. And, then while it was still a childlike understanding, I would see and hear my friends' experiences of their own parents' divorces. So when I was going through law school and I, took the main family law course just to learn about, kind of all the different key topics in the law. But then I was presented with an opportunity to take a mediation course. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. So many families, you do have kids. I mean, I would argue that there are certainly so many benefits, even for the childless couple breaking apart. But especially when there are kids involved, you are forever a family. You are, again, there's no doubt you're changing the structure, but you are together forever. And why would you not want to empower yourselves by figuring out how to communicate? Well, sure, the gold standard would be some form of friendship or at least friendly, acquaintances again. There was something that drew you to one another in the first place. Most important is at least getting your agreements on the same page, doing what's right by your kids. Don't get the negative situation made worse by putting all of the emotional baggage on your kids, or even just the litigation is stoking the fire, is just drawing everything out for everyone involved. You're wasting resources that belong with your family. So that is definitely why I champion mediation whenever possible. I do think it's possible in more cases than people even realize, but I do also recognize that there are times where litigation is still what's needed. And so I also champion mediation because it offsets for the cases that really need the court's time. And we know that the court has so little time. Take charge of your agreements when you can. Let the judge step in and decide for you only in the slim times where there really is no alternative.
Yes, I agree with you completely on that. I just think it's so important. And I don't think people realize that mediation was out there for them. Now we're making it more, the awareness there so people understand that they can do it. They do have another avenue if they can reconcile all of their differences, and trying to figure out what it is that they want to do with regards to their assets and their debts and so on. So I think mediation, I love it. I think it's definitely here to stay. And I think more and more people are becoming aware that this is the avenue you need to go. And the other thing too, I wanted to ask you is like, and we're going to be going into the post here in a minute, but when you're going through, let's say you're going through mediation, and like you said, there's some areas that you can agree on, and then there's a couple areas that maybe you can't, and maybe you do need to go to litigation. Can you do, mediation? Can you do agreement for those things in which you agree upon? And then submit that, and then you only discuss in litigation the items that you're having difficulty with. Is that possible?
Oh my God, yes. That is one of the top benefits to mediation is the amount of flexibility. You can make it look like whatever you need it to look. If you need to focus on all of the issues, do it. You can start in litigation or mediation, but kind of either way, come to the fork in the road of what you just described, where there is clearly at least one or a couple issues. Mediate what you can, litigate what you can't.
Right.
Even in the post, divorce and breakup world, certain states will have different laws that require this more than others. But to me, regardless of what your state's law says, even once you're past that first divorce decree or that first custody plan, always turn to mediation first and say, how far can this get us? Anytime you can avoid court for as much, if not everything, why would anyone subject themselves to the formal court process if you don't have to? So yeah, no, definitely explore mediation for any and all aspects throughout.
Absolutely. I agree with that. But let's make sure we share our disclaimer. Nothing discussed today constitute any mental, religion, legal, or financial advice. Should you seek advice, consult with a professional directly. And like Abbie was saying, also it changes according to, where you live. So you would need to get a professional in the area, of where you live in the state that you live in. So those laws would all pertain to that. And Abbie, where are you located? So those out there would know.
I am in Arizona.
Arizona. So anyone in Arizona, if you're looking for a mediator, please contact Abbie, and we'll give the contact information here shortly. But let's talk a little bit about post-divorce, because so many people I talk to think, okay, once you've gotten divorced, that's it. It's sealed, right? And whatever you've agreed upon, especially if you have children, you're kind of stuck, and that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Absolutely not. For both neutral and colored reasons, there are plenty of times and reasons that you may need to consider changing things. So no, that is thankfully incorrect.
Yeah, because you know what, life happens, right? I mean, things do happen. People have to move because of employment, or maybe custody needs to change a little bit, because you find, and I know for myself, years back, I found that the boys seemed to need their father a little bit more, and so they went to go live with their dad for a while. He was able to give them that male structure that they needed. And so sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. But, you also want to make sure you make the correct modifications and enforcement. You want to make sure that those things continue on, that you're able to do it. So let's talk a little bit about modification and enforcement. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so I like to look at them as kind of two sides of the same coin. They can frequently play together, although they don't always. So, modification is just your need to make changes after that first decree is put in place. So again, that can be for any reason. It can be the kids simply got older and have different needs. It can be, like you mentioned, someone changes jobs. So either the schedule or they have to physically move for it, that there are just moving parts in that regard that would necessitate change. There can also then be colored reasons, which that is the part where more frequently it will tie to the enforcement side of things. Because the enforcement side is if your ex is not following the current orders and you're desperate, you're going, oh my God, I'm basically, stuck between a rock and a hard place. I can't take action. Or just, if it's more about the parenting time schedule, oh my God, I am getting them so much more than what I'm supposed to. And that's impacting my ability to work or do whatever. And you say, where do I turn? What do I do? Well, that is the enforcement component. That is going to be the part where modification is kind of like the original divorce or custody action. If you're able to mediate, you are totally available to explore those alternatives. However, the enforcement component, that's the part where you will never have an alternative, because if they are already not following what the court has ordered, they are not going to listen to, as awesome as your mediator might be, they don't have the authority and the power of the court behind them. They're just saying, hey, this is what's right. This is what you should be doing so we can work through the rest of it. So if someone's already not following the court orders, the fact that you're going to an awesome professional, but is an out of court professional, is not likely to get them to wake up and comply. So that's where you would turn to the court and say, hey, court, my ex is not doing X, Y, and Z that they're supposed to be doing, or they are doing A, B, and C that they weren't supposed to be doing, whichever way it goes, please help me get them back on track. And that's where the court is going to be able to call them in. It's contempt proceedings and figure out what is going to get them back on track and actually following. But that's where it can tie to the modification, just circling back in the clean loop, is because sometimes along with getting them to comply with what they should have already been doing, if it's clear they're not going to make changes going forward or that they can't, well, then you need to consider if at the same time you need to be changing things going forward. So for instance, if they're not paying child support, you're going to enforce and deal with what is already owed. But depending what the other moving parts are, you may need to be making changes so that they would actually follow things appropriately in the future.
Okay. So now can mediation help with this? So like if you decided down the road you needed to do some modifications, right? Some things need to be done. Can you go to mediation and come up with an agreement on that and then file it?
For the modification side only, definitely. That is where I encourage you guys to keep your power, just like in the original proceeding. Your state may require you to try mediation first anyway, but in either instance, it's going to be just like the original proceeding. It's going to be the cost and time effective. It's going to give you the flexibility and freedom to be creative and explore what you need. I highly encourage that, if you can work out all the changes that need to be made and just submit it for the court's approval, definitely do it. It's going to be, if you need to enforce things, that is going to be the only time where straight to court, unfortunately.
Right. And I think what's so great is that you're also an attorney and a mediator, so that you know how to draw up the documentation that's important. And so those out there that are looking at mediation, that's probably something they want to also ask to find out, can the mediator, once you make an agreement, once you decide to modify and you want to make the agreement, can they actually make the documentation up for you and submit that to the court? Make sure that they're able to do that, because sometimes I have heard this, and maybe it's a while, it has been a while back, but where they went to mediation, but then the mediator couldn't actually draw up the documentation, then that had to go to an attorney, and the attorney had to draw up the documentation. So that's just an extra step, an extra cost. So yeah.
You make an excellent point, because just backing up for one other similar comment. So some states require mediators to be attorneys. Some states you will only find attorney mediators. Other states do allow non-attorneys to mediate. And I do see pros and cons to both scenarios. I mean, when you have the non-attorney, you can find, I mean, attorneys come with plenty of their own interesting backgrounds, but when you're exploring a non-attorney mediator, you can find someone who's still primarily in a related industry that, because of whatever your specific details are, it makes more sense to rely on someone with whichever type of background, a more psych heavy background, a more financial based background, whatever. It definitely can have its bonuses, but as you know, one of the biggest drawbacks is a non-attorney mediator will not be trained in all the intricacies of the law. No mediator will ever provide advice. They can only provide information. They're not there to represent either party, but they definitely, non-attorney mediators are very unlikely. Again, there can be state-specific exceptions, but are very unlikely to have whatever certification the state requires that would allow them to draft on your behalf. They'll still be able to put together something memorializing your agreements, but they would not be able to do the court paperwork.
Right. And so that's important. So when you're going to look for a mediator, you need to maybe ask those questions. If they're not able to draw up the actual paperwork, can they recommend a couple different attorneys that can do that? Do they work? And a lot of times I think a lot of the mediators do work closely with a handful of different attorneys, so they can get the job done, because if not, it would just not be beneficial to them. So they're going to have to, they definitely have a way of doing that. So, but you want to ask those questions so that and you also understand your costs involved, because then you would have the mediation costs and then you would have the attorney's costs. So you really want to know your costs up front. So you want to ask them questions like, okay, if we are going to be doing a modification, can you do the paperwork? What is the charge going to be for this, for the filing, all of those kind of things, and really have them lay it out for you so that you understand. So you're not, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened, and that type of thing. So let's talk a little bit about the enforcement of it. And I will share with you that years ago, I had a tremendous difficulty getting enforcement done. And this was years ago, with regards to, that was before they even had the whole system in place with child support. I had such a hard time with that. That's where they just paid you directly instead of going through the system, right? Now you get paid through the system, and if you don't get paid, they have really slam dunk ways of going after people that don't pay their child support. But I have also been told many times is that, and I'm in Florida, so in Florida, that not alimony is not necessarily enforced. You really have to go back, do litigation, do all of those things for enforcement. So let's talk about the avenues of enforcement.
Yeah, so in theory, you can enforce any order not being followed, but as you just noted, the top reasons you tend to need to enforce are the money related, so child and spousal support. Not all states pay through a system, so that is not, it's encouraged, and there will certainly be cases that more default that way. But importantly, not everyone is paying through the system, even here in 2024. So the few things to note are that, again, some of this, the precise detail and flow will be state specific. So definitely contact the professionals in your area. But basically how it's going to work is that you are going to alert the court to whatever specific thing is not being followed. And it will be smoother and easier to prove when you are paying through the system, because those clearinghouses is what it's called here in Arizona. I don't know if it's called exactly the same thing, but whatever processing system that each state uses, those keep detailed records, clean, not something just someone typed in Word or Excel or something, the system logs it as things are happening or not. So that is definitely going to be an efficient proof. Usually, at least here in Arizona, when you are paying through the system, the other kind of encouraged go-to is to pay through a garnishment, for the payor to not even think about it. It's already pulled from their check and then paid through the system to the payee. So that's, again, if there is a garnishment order in place, or whatever your state calls it. Our term of art here in Arizona is an income withholding order, because that is what the garnishment is doing, withholding your income. But, definitely if you are in your original proceeding and know that your ex is, difficult and likely to not pay, already be thinking in that first proceeding to get the garnishment and paid through the system so that you kind of ease your headache on the back end if you know it's unfortunately going to come. And even if you are still in a direct pay, whether truly parent to parent or parent to the system back to the parent, but no garnishment, you will still have ways to prove that it did or didn't happen, especially if it's paid through the system. But, so much is e-payments these days, so it's pretty easy to pull records. You're not even like trying to, back in, I'm probably aging myself as young as I still am, but, it's not like you're looking for copies of canceled checks. You're just going to your ledger on your account online, and finding the key ones and being able to prove it pretty smoothly. From there, of course, the court is going to have different ways it can work to get your ex back on track. But of course, that is still going to, how successful how is your ex actually approaching this? Are they hearing what the court is saying and having real reasons and real struggles that have prevented them? Or are they willfully just being difficult and digging their heels into the sand? So there will be ways that the court can escalate when your ex is still not doing stuff. I know so many people love to, especially on the child support side, send them to jail. I affectionately call it monopoly rules, don't go straight to jail, don't collect your 200. And that is, everyone's favorite to, they're so frustrated at not getting their support. Yeah, lock them up. But that is going to be a court's last case scenario, like a most escalated worst case scenario, or a last resort rather. Because if your ex is locked up behind bars, are you feeling a bit better? Sure, probably. But are you getting the money you've been missing? No, they're locked up behind bars.
Yeah.
There may or may not be some kind of work program, but it's still not going to be if they are just actually working out in the world and paying you rightfully.
Right.
So the court will address your specifics and work to find the plan that is most likely to get your ex doing the things.
Right. So again, mediation would come into play if you could try to talk to them and try to figure out what is the reason that payment isn't being made. Is it not being made because simply they can't juggle it, they just can't afford it? And so this way you're looking at it and trying to come up with some sort of maybe other avenues or something like that, or agree to garnish their tax returns or various different things like that. You can be creative with it through mediation. So you want to try to work out some sort.
No, so enforcement, you can't mediate. I mean,
Oh,
in
okay.
theory, you could attempt to, but the thing with enforcement is if your ex is not listening, the chances that they're willing to sit down at a table and come up with an actionable plan that they then plan to actually follow is very slim to none. Enforcement, like I was saying at the beginning, that really is only court focused. And even the court, I don't know the full story that you alluded to, but even the court, as you saw, can be, I hesitate to say trapped, but again, they can only do so much before it's on your ex who's not complying to do what they're being told or to help come up with the plan that will get them back on track. And so that's where the court may have to escalate. And again, depending on your state specific stuff, there will be different avenues. And at the end of the day, if they need to send your ex to jail, then they will. But yeah, on the enforcement side, unfortunately, mediation, I mean, it could be helpful if your ex is saying that there is a struggle. I'm not willfully not complying. That's the scenario where you have a better chance of mediation offering a real solution. But so often enforcement comes down to them just not wanting to do what they're ordered. And that you're going to have to, unfortunately, have the judge come, do what you're, be the, I think like the Charlie Brown adults, wah,
Mhm.
wah, and tell the parent who is now acting like the child, you need to do right by your children or by your ex if it's about spousal support and
Mhm.
alimony.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be very, very difficult, and I've experienced it. I can be a great movie, I think, sometime, but to be able
Well, that's
to
why I'd
share
love to
what
say
I've
all
went through.
enforcement can start or shift to mediation, but unfortunately, it's that the mediation is going to be more useful if they have a real reason that they can't seem to overcome and they just need help coming up with a creative path to accessing the resources or overcoming whatever bump in the road. But something that's more akin to your ex that is just, again, they're like heels in the sand, just not moving, not listening. Even the judge may have difficulty, but they're going to have a lot more power that a mediator and an out of court professional isn't going to have.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's also the personality of the person you're dealing with, you know. So if they're not complying, 9 tenths out of 10, it's you've had difficulty throughout your marriage with that personality. So yeah, so I totally get it. So let's talk a little bit about modification because some people think that just the smallest things cannot be modified, but they can't they?
Yes, every part of your parenting plan, no matter how big or small, can be changed. Now, some of the smaller changes might not require you formally updating the paperwork with court. That's not to say you can't make the needed changes if it's impacting your day to day.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can definitely make sure that behind the scenes or for the bigger strokes, putting it through court, that whatever changes, it is a living document. You are not stuck in time. Especially, I think of the parents who split up when the kids are, either toddlers or very young elementary school age. Do not think that a plan put in place when they were 3 to 6 years old is the plan that's going to take them through 18 and graduation.
Right. Yeah, because things do change. And then also expenses change, the things that the requirements of the children change and things that they might need. And so if you can't, come to just a talking agreement on it, then sometimes you may have to go to mediation to try to say, okay, Tommy's in baseball and it's costing this much money and, he could be professional, right? Because a lot of times you think, oh, well, that's just, for fun, but maybe this child is going to be a professional baseball player. And so he really does need, this certain direction as he's moving forward in his life. And so that's just an example. But anyhow, so that's something that you could actually go to mediation and lay it out, talk about it and try to get it worked out. I love mediation because I think there's so many things in which you can talk about. There's also, let's talk a little bit about the breaking up of mediation when you do things. What I like about it is that the fact that, when you go in and you have all these, especially when you're going through divorce, you have all these things you need to talk about. You can you can kind of break them up into segments and emotionally that gives you a way to handle it, right? Because so often become so overwhelmed with things that we feel like, okay, we've got to talk about everything all at one time, but we don't need to do that, right? We can separate it out.
Yeah. So I know a lot of mediators are somewhat similar to me. I obviously can't speak on behalf of all mediators,
Mhm.
but for me and the average other mediator, if you go into mediation with attorneys representing you, which is technically an option and can broaden the cases appropriate for mediation because it allows the higher conflict cases or the cases with a history of actual violence to have some added protections. And
Mhm.
in those scenarios, you have a better chance of doing bigger chunks because while, yes, it is still emotional and overwhelming, this is your livelihood, your day to day everything. You have the attorneys who can help offset some of this, can help draw you back bigger picture because they're understanding what the legal landscape is behind all of it. When you are just mediating, just you and your co-parent directly, neither of you are represented. Yeah, I have a 2 hour chunk. Again, I know a lot of mediators in my area. Again, that 2 hours is like a comfort spot where you have enough time to get into things deep enough to make change, to make progress, to get to those agreements. But it is broken up in a way that allows you to both keep the emotional toll in check because you're not going on all day, and also does allow you to focus more clearly on specific issues within the bigger picture of all the issues. You can focus on just what do we need to change about our parenting schedule. Today's session is just about the time schedule. Once we figure that out, we can return on another day and address if or how support needs to change based on that previous session. It is incredible because it is more empowering. It reminds you that, as you know, again, emotionally overwhelming as this can be, you've got this. You know your details, you know what needs to be addressed, and you know the best ideas to put forth that would make sense, that would be feasible for your family.
I think it's great. Yeah, I totally do. And I love the idea that people realize that they can make modifications. They can enforce what has been agreed upon and what is in the court system, that they can get that followed up, that they have some more control of their lives, because so often that's what we feel, out of control, right? As we're going through divorce, separation, we feel totally out of control. And so it allows us to be able to take control of our lives, both parties. And if they can talk about it and come to some sort of agreement, then the mediator can put that into play. And so you're in the driver's seat of what you want to happen versus litigation, and the judge has to make a decision on what needs to happen. And they don't know your family, they don't know the circumstances, they don't know what your life has been like, and so it's better.
And sadly, they don't have much time to, it's not that they don't want to figure it out. They are just, their calendars are insanely busy.
Right, absolutely. Another thing I wanted to talk about was insurances and things like that. Documentation that happens after you get divorced. Like, you go to mediation, you agree up with some things, the documents are in place. Like, for instance, a quadro, insurance, different things like that. Sometimes you need enforcement with that, or you need a modification with that. If difficulties in the documentation or things like that need to come arise. So let's talk a little bit about that.
You mean just how to gather or keep the proof for if and when?
Yeah, because sometimes, like, for instance, if you have a life insurance policy, if you've got something that's in place that you need to make adjustments to after divorce, right? And the party doesn't do it, you can enforce that. You can go back and enforce that. The same thing with the quadro. I will share with you, I had some difficulty with my insurance. I had difficulty with every element of my divorce. But
I'm so sorry to hear that, of course.
And it was overseas, so it was a whole rigmarole of things, and it took several years for that to get resolved, and so enforcement with that. And so sometimes you just have to go and and do that and get in, make it happen.
Yeah, so some of the proof will be somewhat naturally occurring in the sense that when it comes to payments that are required for any purpose, it's going to be clear in bank records or other systems whether that money was in fact paid or not. If things like your parenting time schedule, the actual visitation schedule, you can keep a journal. Again, we kind of alluded to this earlier in the episode where, what your relationship was like on the front end. So you have an idea of where the post breakup ease or not is, the pitfalls that are potentially coming. So if you already know that your ex is likely to be, playing games, so to speak, keep a log of when your ex took the kids, when they brought the kids back. Is that what the orders said, or was it off? And, then it's clear how it was off. Was it the time? Was there communication exchanged? You can keep the texts and emails nearby. I do caution, if you are considering recording conversations as any of your proof, Look into your state's laws. Some states are a one-party recording state, which means as long as you know and are okay recording the conversation that you are a party to, then you are okay. So that means if it's you and your ex and you know it's recorded, you're good. If it's your ex and your kids, you are never going to be good. Other states are what are called two-party recording states, in which case you and your ex both need to be aware that your conversation is being recorded and agree to it. And so definitely make sure you know which state you're in. Don't get yourself in trouble illegally recording things. But another option would be, if it makes sense to get a recording of something, you can, again, as long as you're keeping things in real time so that it's understood to be more accurate, a journal noting what is being done correctly and what's not, and the details of what is going awry is going to be some of the most helpful stuff. Unfortunately, if things do start turning international, that complicates everything all around, because depending whether it's your ex or like a company, you start bumping up against them trying to say, well, that's not our laws, and, a whole spiral that could potentially occur. So in theory, your decree itself can be the most instrumental in helping related professionals process. So you noted the Quadro. That is a document, for anyone listening who doesn't know, that helps you divide certain retirement accounts. And so that's like another, that's a tangent for another episode, but I will just note Quadros are notorious for being the biggest can of worms to get opened. You will work at the details on the front end. You and your ex will agree. It will get signed off. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is great. We're on the same page. It looks awesome. And then you hand the decree and the details to the actual account administrator. Nobody checked the plan documents, and your beautifully crafted plan, through no fault of, you did what you thought was okay. And then they blow it up because they say that's not allowed under the plan. And then you have to scramble to modify or enforce as you're able, based on what the administrator told you.
Right.
So, anytime that the decree can be a very explicit assist for those related professionals, but to do that, you do need to make sure on the front end in the original proceeding that you are consulting with whatever other professionals may be needed to make sure that your decree is as strong as possible, so that you can hopefully avoid modifications and enforcements on, like, to me, that is such a silly way to get tripped up, because it's so neutral. You guys thought you had an agreement. No one in your life did anything. It was this third party, this other company that's like, no, we're not going to help you do that. So if you can get the decree as strong as possible to encourage that, no, you really do need to do this, you are subject to what our court is dictating, that's going to be the other side of proof, is just that, like, direct instructions for these, even with selling the home, help the realtor put details of, like, these are the key timelines. If things don't get agreed to, this is when the realtor can start making decisions on our behalf to get it done. You can have contingency plans and all sorts of extensive detail that will be the proof to hopefully avoid needing the back end, the proof that just smoothly sends it through the first time, but would double the proof if, it does fall apart.
Yeah. A great point. A lot of these things we don't even think about, as we're going through divorce, right? And then, and we get, the divorce happens and we think, okay, we're all right, smooth sailing. But then all this other documentation has to take place. And like you said, sometimes you have to modify as you go along, because you're finding out the documentation has changed, what's necessary, that kind of thing. So don't be afraid, those out there, don't be afraid that if you do need to modify something, then go to the appropriate, mediator or attorney to be able to get those things done. If something needs to be enforced, then doggone it, enforce it, make it happen for you, because these are areas that you've agreed upon. If something changes, then it needs to be modified. If it's not modified, it needs to be enforced. And so it sounds simple, but it's not. And so you do need the correct professional in your state to be able to help you with that. And Abbie, you're great. It goes by so fast. So are there any last closing words you have for our audience today?
Just one sentiment, to the extent that you didn't know modification was an option, obviously this was eye-opening. But to anyone who thought modification was kind of a like bad or dirty word, that it was only tied to the times where there is enforcement that bad behaviors led to this, modification is not it's so neutral. It just means changes need to be made for any reason, whether that is simply, like we noted, the passing of time or the changing of schedules, or it could be because someone is wrongfully not complying, or if there was a history of violence and there is, unfortunately new violence. There can be neutral and colored reasons, but modification is your friend. It is there to support you after the main proceeding is over. And yeah, with that, Cece, you and I could go on all day about these topics, but just thank you so much for having me.
I've experienced almost everything. It's like been a bad dream, but it's just it's propelled me into this field. So it's some things happen for a reason. Now, Abbie, I want to make
now I get to help spread the word about modification and enforcement.
Yeah, really. Abbie, I want to share with everybody how to get a hold of you. And so you can go to Abbie, which is her email, Abbie, ABBIE, and it's Modern Legal Solutions. It's MODERNLEGALSOLUTIONS.com. That's our email. Go to Modern Legal Solutions, plural.com, and that's her website. So if you want any advice, or if you're in the Arizona area and you're looking that you need some help with this, that Abbie certainly will be able to help you. If if not, and you just got a question, you can ask her and she can maybe direct you to someone else. But we want to thank you so much.
Legal advice, Arizona specific, but if you have questions, I'm always happy to provide guidance where and how I can. Yeah.
Right. And we're connected with so many different people in different states now that you can maybe help with that. So it is great being able to be with everyone here today. We want to make sure you guys please enjoy, like, share, and comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would appreciate that. If you would just click it and say whether you like it or not, we would love that. We'd like to be able to know that people are listening. And if you've got a comment, go ahead and share that, and we'll definitely redirect that back to Abbie so she can answer whatever questions you might have. So again, you can email Abbie at Abbie, ABBIE, at modernlegalsolutions.com. Check out our website, modernlegalsolutions.com. And of course, Abbie is an attorney and a mediator, Mind Your Manners Mediation, and she's in the Arizona area. So if you guys are looking for a mediator or an attorney in that area, please contact Abbie. So we'd appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
And thank you a huge final time for helping me spread the good word. I always enjoy guest starring on any of your shows. I just think this is so much.
Well, we would love to have you back on again. Of course, you guys know how to reach me. If you don't, I'll share it with you. You just go to goingsolonetwork@gmail.com, goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. And then you can check out our website, thenewstreamingnetwork.com. Everything is on that. We hope that you be able to find what you need. We've got many people, many hosts, many guests on there, and we want you to be able to contact them if so needed. You guys, we want to thank you so much for listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. That's our radio station. We are a radio, TV, and a podcast station, newstreamingnetwork.com. You can find all of our information there. That's the home of Going Solo Media and Going Bold Media. So we want to thank you guys for joining us. I am Cece Shatz, the Doyenne of relationship building, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.